Hello, welcome to Cognitive Leaps Tech Meet Mental Health interview series. In our series, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will be engaging in dialogues with various experts in the digital medicine field across the course of series. Today, our host, Professor Skip Rizzo, will interview Linda Jacobson, a gerontologist implementing VR and AR for aging populations. We are so excited to have her here today. Tech Meet Mental Health interview series is brought by Cognitive Leap Solution Inc. Just a little bit about our sponsor, Cognitive Leap. At here, we offer a comprehensive closed-loop solution to children's attention and emotional challenges. Our interventions include the innovative virtual reality attention tracker, 8 online assessments, precision AI-based brain optimization training, therapeutic music exercises, and family assist programs. Our company has a strong research and development team with world-renowned experts who focus on neurology, cognition, psychology, engineering, and artificial intelligence. We are currently working on an FDA study for the approval of our virtual reality classroom, diagnosing ADHD in children. I would like to introduce our host, Professor Skip Rizzo. I'm so happy to have our speakers here today. Our host speaker, Skip Rizzo, is a professor at USC Davis School of Gerontology and USC Tech School of Medicine Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences. And also he's a director of Medical Virtual Reality Institute for Creative Technologies. He serves as an advisor for Cognitive Leap. Hi, Dr. Rizzo.
Hi. Well,
how are you
doing? For that kind introduction.
Yeah. Right. Do you want to introduce our speaker?
Yes. Okay. Do you have a slide? The next slide there. Yeah. So
there we are.
Linda Jacobson, who's been a friend for many years, has been kicking around the VR space for quite some time, and I'm privileged to get to work with her and consult with her on some projects now. But I'm really excited about this, where we're going to have a free-flowing conversation about all the ins and outs about virtual reality over the years and where she sees things heading in the future, and a couple of other pretty interesting topics. So why don't we get started? And I think everybody has seen Linda's bio. I'm not going to read it. So Linda will become more apparent as we discuss her work. So why don't we go to the live feed and we'll get started. Are we moving on from this?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Linda, how you doing today?
Skip, I'm doing great today. Thank you. And thanks, Emma, for getting us off the ground.
Yeah. So look, first, I always have to indulge in a little bit of, nostalgia from the past to kick these things off. And I can remember first seeing you speak at the 1995 VR World event. I think it was a Meckler Media event. And it was a nighttime event that there was literally 500 or 600 people packed into this space. Where you did this awesome overview of VR. And I was still a newbie at the time. So, it was inspirational for me. I got excited. I think we all went to a bar after and had a few drinks and everything. Vague memories going back a few years. But I was impressed with your visionary perspective back then. And then I saw you again. I think I saw you at Medicine Meets VR at that conference. But then the next big memory was the 1999 IEEE VR conference in Houston, where you were the keynote speaker. And the thing, aside from your talk, I'll never forget this moment where, it was like an hour-long keynote. And I think you were at an hour and 2 minutes hitting your conclusions. And I remember, I'm not going to say his name, but I remember the chair of the conference, and he was in the back of the room, and he's like, his head was ready to explode because they were very precise on the timings, and I respect going over time on these things, as anybody that knows me will attest. But the thing was that everything you were presenting, the audience was engaged. Nobody was, it was 11 to 12. I can remember this. Nobody was dying to race out of the room to go get lunch. Everybody was just sitting there and nodding their heads. And you had the crowd in awe, basically, because of your breadth of knowledge. So I'm really honored that you agreed to come on the podcast. And with that introduction, tell us about the early days. And
well, thanks for that blast from the past. And I remember that IEEE presentation because I was asked to predict the future of virtual reality 5 to 10 years out, right? So this was 99, and I was looking at a 2008 timeframe. I was looking 2007, 2008, and I thank you for your kind words about the content of the presentations. I really am. Consider myself in many ways a messenger, a translator, an explainer. And I had tapped into the brain power of a lot of people around the world who, at the time, I was calling VREG, right? So I had taken a page from the JPEG efforts in those early days about standardizing file types and approaches to sharing photographs. So we had, if you remember, JPEG and MPEG. So I created something called VREG, and it was the Virtual Reality Experts Group. And it consisted of people such as yourself all around the world who I consulted with to get from them their best predictions of how VR would play out in the first decade of the 2000s. So I really at that time underestimated the amount of time that would be required to get to where we are today, but really focused on the fact that the folks who had been born in 1984, the year the Mac came out. These are the first digital natives. These are the people who I said would be entering the workforce and starting to take leadership positions in the late 2000s. And these would be the people who would be did not need convincing about the power of immersive visualization as a tool for collaboration and communication and joy and productivity. So that was really about the people and who would be making VR safe for the world at that point. But I remember we encountered at that time in the mid to late 90s a lot of challenges about VR based on media perception because of the media hype. There were a lot of people in business who poo-pooed virtual reality. They saw it as a video game you wear on your head, or they saw it as a potentially addictive substance, similar to psychedelic drugs, which had something to do with the fact that the early proponents of virtual reality came straight out of the countercultural movement. And people such as Timothy Leary and John Perry Barlow were espousing the ontological and consciousness raising benefits of VR. So there were a lot of misperceptions on the business side. I was involved by the late 90s. I was immersed in bringing virtual reality R&D tools into different enterprise settings, rather than the arts and entertainment area where I'd gotten started 10 years earlier.
Well, very interesting you say that, because I have a clip here. I want to share my screen. This is from...
I'm laughing already, clips.
Yeah. Let me get this started. I hope you all can see this. All right. right.
This is what I
That's
think.
from
I think it is.
1995. That was the first, the peak of the heyday of the early first wave of VR. But here's a clip from 1992, and you're in this clip, and you're talking about. Well, we'll let the clip play.
In these early days of virtual reality, we tend to think of it in a game or adventure environment, but virtual reality is also an important design tool. Here to show us some examples are Chris Alice, cyberspace missionary with Autodesk, and also Linda Jacobson, who is a computer writer and editor and specialist in the area of virtual reality, and who put together this handy-dandy guide to virtual reality from the people who make AI Expert magazine. Linda, let me ask you, there's so much hype about virtual reality and so much confusion about it. What is the state of the art right now? What is virtual reality? Where's the technology at?
It's coming out of the labs and into our laps, almost, Stuart. The technology that's called virtual reality has been around in the 40s and was mostly found in huge research institutions, mostly government-related, military-related, then moved into the giant educational institutions and is now moving down into the labs and offices of private businesses that are creating systems for people like doctors and architects and scientists to use to help them understand their data.
And so we have cyberspace missionaries like...
So that was 29 years ago. Just as an off-the-cuff question, if you could go back 29 years and give yourself one bit of advice, what would it have been?
Oh my God. That's get a haircut. I believe that I would say follow your gut and be patient, and this too shall pass, both in a positive way and in the challenging ways too.
Those were the two key ingredients for surviving from that time to the current time. There's a lot of casualties along the way. A lot of people big in the field that eventually left and did other things. And
that's right.
found meaning in other ways. But I'm in the same boat with you. I was expecting by 2000 that we would have where we're at today, and had I known it would take as long as it did, I might not have had the stomach, the gut to stick with it so long. But
what happened is the World Wide Web happened.
Yes.
And then it took everybody's attention away from what we were doing. Yeah. So
tell us a little bit about the precursor to that. What led you to that point? And just a quick trajectory into the current day. A tall order here. Because there's too much to talk about, but then we'll get on to some other topics. Well, I want to hear what brought you to that point.
Okay, all right. Well, so in the content of what I was saying 29 years ago in Computer Chronicles, I was talking about the trickle-down theory, right, of the fact that virtual reality was leaving the labs of the techno elite and coming into the hands of the people. So that is really my background and my value system in terms of working in this space. I was a child in the 60s and the 70s. I came of age in the late 70s, early 80s, but growing up in New York City in the 60s and 70s, I was really influenced by the coalescing of movements fighting for civil rights and women's rights and gay rights and environmental protection and anti-war, the emergence of feminist arts movement, and this whole kind of concept of power to the people really impressed me, impressed upon me. And I was raised in a world of Holocaust survivors and Holocaust refugees, and in Brooklyn and Queens in a kind of a religious environment, people with elders who did not speak English. So I was always seeking to try to understand their language, and control the world around me, which seems somewhat chaotic and anxious. But so I got really into music and theatrical performance and video production, and really loved the science and technology of production and music and theater, as well as performing it. So I became a journalist, and my first job after college was writing about computers and working in the field of music and audio and film production, in terms of the development of the digital technologies and techniques being used to create and present music and video and film. So that's where I started, and I was very interested in the democratization of access to having a voice. You know, I being a journalism student, I learned that the power of the press belongs to those who own it. Right, you may have heard that expression. And so in the mid to late 80s, when desktop publishing came along, you know, to me that was like, oh yeah, and power to the people. Now we could do our own press publishing. And I felt the same way about the Mac and about access to the internet. And so when I got turned on to virtual reality in 1988, when I read Stuart Brand's book, The Media Lab, Inventing the Future at MIT. And also I had been assigned to write about spatial audio used in immersive environments for simulating aerospace flight. I saw VR through the lens of how do we get this technology into artists and educators and out of the, you know, these hallowed halls. And I decided I would be focused 100% on writing about virtual reality, getting involved in the new scene of virtual reality, and helping people access the tools that will allow them to experiment with virtual reality. So that was what was going on for me at that point. Also in the early 90s, I was road managing and traveling with a multimedia musical ensemble, all women who invented and built all their own percussion instruments. The band was called De Cuckoo, and the philosophy of the band was that everybody can perform. You don't need to be a professional musician to create beautiful music and join together. And we use digital technology to allow the audience to play with the band. That really affected me as well. So there were a number of things happening around the same time. I was invited to help produce the very first conference bringing together artists and technologists. It was the first virtual reality exhibition. It was called Cyber Arts. And that was in 1990. And that's where I first met and started collaborating with people like Jaron Lanier and Mark Bolas and Brenda Laurel and Mort Heilig and Myron Kruger and these amazing people. I want to show you something that I pulled just a little like show and tell here. Just so Cyber Arts, this book Cyber Arts was based on the event and the presentations. It was a beautiful book. I shortly joined after that was published, or somewhere before that was published. I was involved as an editorial co-founder in the development of Wired magazine. And you could see on the image here, the top half of the premiere issue of Wired. And I'm really grateful to the Wired co-founders, Jane Metcalf and Louis Rossetto, for inviting me to join them. The first issue of Wired, I wrote about the emerging homebrew virtual reality community and the efforts of people taking things like the Mattel Power Glove and Radio Shack TVs and hacking their own virtual reality systems driven by Atari 2600s and Commodore Amigos. And that turned into a book deal that I wrote, Garage Virtual Reality, after that. And that was a how-to book, which it shipped with a floppy disk, right? And with all these addresses for FTPing code, because this came out before the World Wide Web was developed. And so I traveled around to a lot of universities and events after that, speaking to people about garage virtual reality, about the ability to do it yourself, to make it yourself. And oftentimes I'd be put on panel discussions, or sharing a stage otherwise with people from companies like Silicon Graphics and Hewlett Packard and Sun Microsystems and Evans and Sutherland, all of them saying, oh, you need to have a big honking supercomputer that could run these simulations at 90 hertz or 120 frames per second. Otherwise, it's going to make people sick. You need to have anti-aliasing with no jaggies. We got to simulate reality. And the only way to do it is with a supercomputer. And then I'd get up on stage and would say, don't believe a thing they just said. You don't need access to any kind of big multi-pipe supercomputer. You could do this at home. At the same time, I had been leading the virtual reality users group in San Francisco, bringing on stage at the Exploratorium, the Science Museum, a lot of people doing show and tell from the Silicon Valley area. It was really exciting to do that. Every month we had a VR users group meeting and did demos, and a lot of the people who showed up were from industry, from Silicon Valley companies. And I was recruited by Silicon Graphics through that, in that venue, to join the company in 1995 as the computer industry's first virtual reality evangelist. And which is actually, I'll go back here a second.
A lot of folks don't know that name, Silicon Graphics. Maybe you can just describe it real quick.
Yeah.
Okay. It was so pivotal at the time.
So let's look one more time at this. You could see that. Let me depict the photo. Can you? Oh, wait a minute. Give me a sec here. Just share. Can you all see that image? Okay, so here I am up in the upper right, shortly after arriving at Silicon Graphics. Silicon Graphics at the time was one of the largest, most successful computer companies in the world that had really brought into commercial use very powerful graphics capabilities on computers, enabling special effects, digital effects in film production that had never been done before, and also enabling the creation of visual simulations so realistic and fast that they had a huge impact on military and flight simulation and aerospace and visualization. And then soon enough, scientific data visualization, financial data visualization. So SGI was an international company. There, you could see the displays in front of me. What my role was focused on was helping to create partnerships and find opportunities for these very powerful graphics supercomputers to be used as the engines for a large-scale immersive visualization, AKA virtual reality. And so we were using for display headsets, but you could see behind me in that image on screen, a large, very big curved screen. And we would project stereoscopic 3D images on that screen, and people in the room would be wearing these electronic shutter glasses, which would allow them to perceive the images as if they were popping off the screen and floating in space in front of them. So stereoscopic imagery and projection was really important at that point. My role, and this is where I met you. What's that?
My first VR project was 96, working with Marcus Tiebo and Carl Kesselman with an immersive desk running on a $200,000 Silicon Graphics Onyx, I think. But mine was more basic. It was mental rotation blocks and wearing the shutter glasses. But even in that time, that stereoscopic projection wasn't bad. I mean, it was actually quite good.
Oh my God! I one of the things that blew me away early on was the cave. Okay, the cave is an acronym for a room, a small room, whether it's 10 by 10 by 10, a cube shaped room in which you've got stereoscopic imagery projected from behind on every surface of the room, every wall, the floor, the ceiling, and you would go inside and wear glasses, and you'd be surrounded by these stereoscopic images. So this approach to VR was used at every single automotive company. And I remember going to visit General Motors and going into their R&D lab where they had a cave, and they were using the cave to design for ergonomic design of cockpits of new cars. And they said, we're going to show you one of the new model cars. And I went in, and inside the cave, there was just a desk chair, a simple chair without any armrests. It was just a simple classroom chair. I had the glasses, and I'd been carrying a clipboard. Okay, I had a clipboard because I was taking notes on a clipboard at the time. And I put on the glasses, and I sat down on the chair. Boom! They turned on the display, and suddenly I'm in a 4-door coupe. Brand new car. I could see the dashboard in front of me. There's a projected steering wheel, windshield, windows. I mean, it was basically a replicated car interior. And to my right, there was a credenza, just kind of, that thing that you have where the gear shift is and you put your cups on. Well, I was so taken by this. I wanted to put my hands on the steering wheel because I had trackers on my hands. And I took the clipboard, and I went to put it on the credenza. It looked so real. It was so solid. I forgot it wasn't real. And I went to put my clipboard on that, and boom, it fell to the floor. And really it was like, oh my God, just hoisted on my own petard.
Yeah. Well, look, just because we've got a lot to cover, can you do a quick trajectory from these times now at Silicon Graphics, maybe a little bit about what happened to Silicon Graphics, and then fast forward towards the future and the kind of stuff that you're really interested in now? What's your path been?
In large part because of your work and that of so many other amazing people whom I met when we started attending Medicine Meets VR, virtual reality and people with disabilities, working on the kinds of projects that were happening up at the University of Washington HIT Lab with Hunter Hoffman and phobia treatment, and then out on the East Coast all over, there was really cool stuff happening. So that because of the environment in which I grew up, I grew up in an area where there was in a family where there was a lot of mental illness, and where it was considered a shameful thing to have a mental illness. Plus, in the late 90s, my own grandmother started developing dementia disorders, and I remember being just so stumped by the way she was treated by caregivers. It was as if she were crazy or childish. It was something, it just seemed off about it. And I wanted to try to understand how the brain works, both to understand how we perceive the world around us and what happens as we age. I decided to focus my efforts a lot on virtual reality in medicine. I also was interested in virtual reality as a tool for design and planning. And I left Silicon Graphics in 2001 and started a virtual reality production studio with 4 or 5 partners. And we did bespoke immersive visualization environments for everybody from Bechtel to Sun Microsystems to Sandia National Labs. And we kept that going for a while, even after 9/11 really challenged us. But the timing, it wasn't really great in terms of virtual reality in a practical way. There was our demo system was an SGI Octane, which we had to roll into customer sites on hand truck, so not very impressive in terms of portability. I had the opportunity to return to a company where I'd written about 40 patent applications early in the 90s. This was Xerox PARC. And Xerox spun PARC out as a center for commercial R&D. And I rejoined PARC to head up communications and marketing to promote the innovation processes involved in development of technology based on scientific breakthroughs. And while I was at PARC, I really started to understand how to look at problems in a different way in order to develop the right solution, rather than developing a solution and then go looking for problems, right? So while I was there, I had to deal with providing long distance elder care to my grandmother, my other grandmother, and my mom, both of whom developed cognitive impairment. And as I was struggling to do that from afar while working full-time job, I also had 3 great children I am raising. And I saw how I felt that the world of long-term care and support for folks who are experiencing cognitive impairment or caring for people with cognitive impairment was completely old school, lacking in digital tools to enhance personalization of care and communication amongst people. And I saw that as a real problem. I was shocked when I saw what it was like for the elders in our country and what was down the pike for me, maybe 30 years away. And I came out of that after they died in the late 2000s. I came out that thinking, I'll be damned if I'm going to wind up in a place like this and put my children through this. I'm going to learn as much as I can. And this actually about this field, in order to then go back to what I know and bring the right tools, the right techniques. And there's another thing, looking back to what I would have told myself as a young person, the number one commandment for all journalists and all storytellers is know thy audience. I think the biggest mistake that I made in the first business I launched was not knowing the audience well enough to understand how they would budget and implement virtual reality once they got it up and running. And they're not paid to conduct experiments, right? So I had that lesson under my belt, and I decided I was going to immerse myself in the field of long-term care and elder care and dementia care in order to understand the ecosystem, the people who receive care, the people who deliver it. And so I left PARC. I quit that job and I spent 5 or 6 years working in assisted living and going into senior living communities and leading activities about technology. That's how I developed an awareness. And then once I developed that subject matter awareness and understood the players and how it worked, then I went back into our community and started collaborating with the other like-minded people who are interested in applications of VR for lifelong cognitive health.
And what do you, I mean, I think this is a great trajectory of, deep dive in the trenches from personal experience and then gathering beyond personal experience, the information needed, and then coming back to looking at VR and other technologies, certainly, for dealing with the issues of aging. And this is something I've been an advocate of, in my career, is that it's not just for, digital generation folks, that, kids to older adults, the whole lifespan. There are points of intervention like what you see behind me with this virtual classroom we use with ADHD assessment. This is part of the Cognitive Leap, our sponsor project. But going to aging now, what do you see now? You're working with Penumbra, and part of your focus is on what's the future of VR, AR, mixed reality, whatever your term is, in the aging domain, or at that end of the lifespan.
There is a growing set of clinical data available, emerging now, that help us, those of us who are developing these tools and these platforms, to understand what's feasible, what's not feasible, and the directions we should be heading. And I've been tracking the scientific literature very recently to kind of understand the trends in and where there is already existing data for the use of virtual reality for this audience. And I think what really concerns me, as my friends' parents are becoming more in need of support, and as I saw it myself, that there's very little a solid understanding of how to assess cognitive fitness. And the current standard neuropsychology assessments that have been criticized left and right for really poor sensitivity and specificity, especially in differentiating what we call mild cognitive impairment from just normal brain performance. So the research has documented that that virtual reality can be used as a precise, replicable, valid tool to create environments that can be used for testing cognitive performance, to start to understand what our baseline is and to see how we're developing. Right now, people are really afraid of cognitive decline. There's no treatment for it. We don't understand what causes it. We know there's modifiable risk factors and such. But that said, people aren't really anxious to test their brain performance, even though there's a lot of advocacy and understanding that we need to have other types of diagnostic tests all the time as we get older. But we don't really think about doing that for our brains, even though we'll go and get mammograms and colonoscopies and blood tests every year and such. But it's so important to receive a timely diagnosis if you've got some kind of cognitive problem, so you can avoid taking drugs. And the scientists know that one of the first symptoms of functional decline in the brain is impaired spatial memory. Well, let's use spatial computing then to address that. So that's one area. Then there's this other area that's so promising. We know that stress is a significant factor in creating heart disease. And as we're learning, it also has a real impact on our cognitive and mental health. Of course, stress makes you crazy. The effects of bad stress in our lives, we know, can be modified by relaxation techniques and lifestyle changes and psychosocial therapies, all of which can be provided through these virtual reality systems and tools and platforms. So especially to those who can't access these elsewhere, these types of techniques and therapies elsewhere for whatever reason. So I'm excited about the use of virtual reality in those settings, but also for use in complementary and alternative and integrative medicine, such as mind, body, and movement and energy therapies. So that's where I'm excited to work right now.
Well, I think you're correct in that there is a lot of literature showing that we can't necessarily uh, cure some forms of dementia, but we can reduce the speed in which it leads you into a state of
You're
cognitive
writing. It's
decline.
it's your work. It's let's just acknowledge that a lot of this has to do with your huge impact on the field, and you're shining the light and saying, look, guys, let's look here. And that's happened. So
Yeah.
thank you
Well,
for that.
but there are others, like early guy, Robert Astor, he did Morris Watermays VR tests, which is a pure hippocampus assessment, place learning, like what you say with spatial memory. And, found remarkable results in the late 90s, with this stuff, doing fMRI studies showing hippocampus not being activated effectively in poor performance in people with Alzheimer's, with schizophrenia, PTSD, and so forth. And that work has evolved. Now there's a number of companies that are out there focusing on this. I think they're primarily focused on respite, on giving older folks experiences that they're not
Right.
going to be able to have anymore.
That's right.
I think there's some value in that, and particularly maybe even in the reminiscence therapy type approaches.
You know what? I had this saying that I would sometimes blurt out when giving a talk to certain audiences, or I really believed it, and it stems back from the early days when people like Timothy Leary were promoting virtual reality. And I would say, if drugs are for people who can't handle reality, then virtual reality is for people who can't handle drugs. And lo and behold, here we are, all decades later. I was so upset about the kinds of drugs that were being given to calm my mom in that condition. She was experiencing the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, and there's all kinds of agitation and stress. And right now the approach is to drug people, right? In order to address those symptoms. But we know from the work that's been done by researchers in this field that virtual reality experiences are very successful in quelling anxiety, agitation, and providing new experiences, expansive experiences for people who are confined. I mean, to me, this is the audience that is the most deserving of what we have created right now.
Yeah, it's funny, when I first started to talk a little bit about aging applications, late 90s, early 2000s, and that was back in the day when people were saying, do you think older adults are going to adopt email? And everybody was questioning whether that was going to be possible. We know how that turned out. And I from my experiences and what I've seen with some of the other groups that I've worked with over the years, and some of the companies that are out there now, in fact, there's no age limit for having an experience in virtual reality. I know my mom regularly, I'm always sticking her head in a headset, and she's 87, and trying to give her new experiences, which she loves, and so I don't think there's an upper limit. I think there's a lot of good that we can do. We don't have a ton of time. I knew this was going to happen because there's so much to talk about, but I do want to dig into another area that I think is particularly relevant. I always ask the question about, what kind of person is attracted to VR, but I want to ask it in a different way with you, because you, in fact, are the first woman on the podcast. Admittedly, I've only done 3 of these so far. First one was with Walter.
Third time's a charm, Skip.
Yeah, exactly. Walter Greenleaf, Brett Leonard, and now you, Linda. Tell us about the state of women in VR. Has there been a history? What do you see happening? Well, you answer the question. I'm not going to answer it for you.
I don't know. Are you sure you don't want to talk about Italians in VR? Isn't that a lot more interesting? I don't know.
Well, there have been a number of
them. Yeah. Okay. In the early days, before there was a lot of money involved, when there was no money at stake, no money to be made. There was a lot of women. This is a lot of women involved in virtual reality in those early days, and this had a lot to do simply with the culture of the tech scene at that time, but also the culture of I would say when the tech scene, but also just the culture of storytelling and communications, people involved in that. So when I first started working in VR, first of all, I'd come out of the music industry, the recording industry, where there were very few women who were seen as influencers and key opinion leaders, if you will, in that space. So I had already been influenced by and very admiring of electronic music pioneers, Wendy Carlos, who did Switched on Bach, and Suzanne Ciani, who was a sound designer famous for synthesizing the sound of a Coke bottle popping open, bubbles coming up. And she went on to do the sound for Tron and all these pinball machines. And I really admired Leslie Ann Jones, audio engineer for Lucasfilm. So I was influenced by these people to just be strong and go out there and just be a person in technology.
Right. Right.
So when I came in to the VR scene, I was really impressed by and admired and was taught by Brenda Laurel and Jackie Morey and Shar Davies, and Lasco Harville, of course, was key in the development of virtual reality as we know it today. And Lasco worked with VPL Research and the General Lanier's team, and was fundamental in creating the first immersive environments, headsets and data gloves. Beth Wenzel at NASA Ames was an amazing audio engineer who specialized in binaural sound. And there's Sherry Rabinowitz, was using video and satellite communications for sharing video experiences amongst artists in different cities. So all these women were amazing and paved the way. So I see the today that there's continues to be a lot of gender inequality that is being overcome by a lot of the women who are out in the space. But the technology industry as a whole has a well-documented gender problem. Women are underrepresented. I looked at some of the specs. There's like very few percentage of women who are web developers. Maybe 28% of all web developers are women, and even a smaller portion, 14%, I think, of all game developers are women. So we really do need to encourage young women to get involved in STEM, but there's also a lot of art that is needed and a lot of human factors work, and no matter what your skill is, virtual reality is a transdisciplinary discipline, a transdisciplinary medium that needs many different types of skills and talents to make it work. So whatever your passion is, there's a place for you in this space if you're interested in creating these experiences for people, which fundamentally are leveraging technology that I consider to be the most powerful communications medium ever invented. And today, the women I just want to make a shout out. I'm just so okay. Noni de la Pena, one of your colleagues, immersive journalism, amazing storyteller, understands the power of the camera. My Kathleen Cohen, also in LA, is an opinion leader, really doing a lot of incredible work about digital twins and the rights we have to control our own digital and virtual representations of ourselves. Britton Heller, an attorney who's interested in the rights of the ethics and the rights of people in virtual environments. I really admire a lot of the young entrepreneurs who are developing in this space. Avina Somareddy from Neuro Rehab VR, Laura Garcia at Applied VR, another great one. And Kavya Perlman is in the ethics space, is a force to be reckoned with. And I also really admire Susanna Pollack, who's the head of Games for Change in New York, looking at social impact. And I have to give a big thanks and big hosannas and applause to the journalist Addie Robertson from The Verge. And because she's got her finger on the pulse, and she's actually woke me up to what was going on and called me out of the blue in like 2013 or 2014 to say, to introduce herself and say, I don't know if you have heard of Oculus, but it looks like virtual reality is coming into vogue again, and I'd like to interview you about. I'm writing an oral history of virtual reality for The Verge, and would like to let our readers know that there's a history, that there's a there. And I had said, what are you talking about? Because I was immersed in senior living stuff at that time. I hadn't even been aware. So that those are the people to whom I send hosanna, to lots of kudos.
Just as a disclaimer, there are so many names. We can't name them all. So
we can't name them all. You're right.
Get mentioned, but a lot of great.
I'm sure. I know I left out people, and if I left you out, girl, I'm sorry. You go.
Okay, we're heading towards questions now. One last thing: if you had unlimited funding in 2 years, just quick 30 seconds, 2 years to build something, what would that be?
Well, okay. Volumetric recording of all my friends and loved ones in virtual environments. I would love to capture, bring everybody together, have a party, and have it all caught in volumetric video to be able to create immersive holographic style imagery. I would love to recreate incredible group events from history that have been meaningful to our elders today, in order to create a sense of joy and nostalgia, but also then to use those environments as perhaps ways to assess spatial memory and interaction and collaboration. So I'd love to, I'd love to recreate a good old Grateful Dead concert, and bring fun. Everybody in there, because as my friends know, there's nothing like a Grateful Dead concert, and I would love to bring people in. I think that with unlimited money, the most important thing to me is to represent our people.
Criticized with VR as being a solitary experience, but
exactly,
that's old school. It's coming. We're going to start having more shared experiences that are more easy to do and more real, if you
That's
will.
right. That's right. And I also see AR as critical in this continuum too. Right. So that's,
we always forget about that, but it's there. Okay, we've got questions. So Emma, do you have a couple of questions here for us?
Yes, we got a lot of really good questions. I will mention a couple of them because the time limited. Hold on, let me share screen. Okay, one of audience asked, what type of care VR can provide in aging service? How does VR play together with the current aging service system?
This is exactly the topic that I've been researching in conducting scientific literature reviews, so I will. I pulled out this this recent article review I did, literature review, because I'm going to tell you what I believe from the findings to be really exciting areas, based on the focus of studies that have been published in the last 5 years. We can identify 3 broad areas in aging services that have been shown as effective usages of virtual reality in this population. And those are therapeutic recreation, or recreational therapy, depending how you look at it, which helps them manage stress and anxiety. So therapeutic recreation, cognitive assessment, that's what we were talking about for performance, both for baseline and then assessing the progression of symptoms or lack of. And the third area is in cognitive rehabilitation and training. There's real evidence there that VR could be used simply to empower people who've had some type of brain or cognitive decline to function successfully through rehab and training.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Thank you.
Skip, would you agree? I don't, before we.
Oh yeah, no, I'm all in on those 3.
Okay.
It's very encouraging research in these areas, a lot of promise, and it makes sense that VR can be used in these formats.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And here is another question. She asking you, in Linda's experience, is VR still considered a premium product for communities in need?
A premium, right? That's a really interesting question in terms of accessibility. The price has definitely come down, right? It's the days when I was doing helping virtual reality systems be sold, the average selling price was $250,000, right? That's now the equivalent system, actually something far more powerful, is in the kind of the 4 to 5 figure range. And that's where we are right now. So that's expensive in terms of a capital equipment purchase, much less having to pay an ongoing cost if you have to. However, the tools are accessible and there's no risk. There's a lot of ongoing support for people to be successful with it. And the fact is, we do need to look at how we bring this technology into underserved populations and remote populations who may not have access to the facilities at larger areas or metro areas. I think it's not right now accessible to every senior living community for a lot of different reasons, but price isn't necessarily the main reason. We have to think less about, we're thinking less about price and more about the value. Like, what do you get as a result of it? What's the, what are the benefits of the investment? And that's what our industry and our community is trying to quantify right now to help people budget for it and implement it. But the costs are going to keep going down.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I have learned so much from you today. And because the time limited, we cannot answer all of the questions. And Skip, do you want to talk about next speaker a little bit?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, Linda, for sharing your experiences over the last hour. We probably need to book another hour at some point to really do a deeper dive into everything. We knew this was going to happen, but
thank you for inviting me, both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So next month, Sandy Chapman is going to lead off. She is a powerhouse who has built from the ground up a center on brain health at the University of Texas in Dallas. I got to meet her a couple of years back and did a talk at their center and got to tour for a couple of days and just saw incredible wealth of intellect and execution. And she's going to be joined. This will be the first time we're going to have multiple folks. She's going to be joined by 2 of her team members who are building a variety of different types of tech-based solutions. One I'm a real big fan of called Charisma, which is a virtual world for helping folks on the autism spectrum develop social skills and so forth. Really well done application, but they've done a bunch of stuff, and so we'll have Julie Fratantoni, sorry, Julie, and also Aaron Tate, who is a programming warlord. So we'll have a nice mix of folks, you know, the founder, the visionary, and the folks that are, you know, the up and coming, you know, warriors that are building stuff out from a good scientific basis, all for a very positive purpose. So I'm excited about next month's podcast, and I hope to see everyone there. And Emma, I think you have couple last slides here.
Yes, I have a couple slides. And as mentioned in the beginning of the event, if you are interested in participating in our FDA trial, you can scan the QR code here to fill out an interest form. We will reach out to you. And once again, thank you so much for coming to our third event for the Tech Meets Mental Health series. I hope you have learned from our amazing speaker today. Thank you, Ms. Jacobson, and thank you again to our host, Dr. Rizzo. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay,
have a good day. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank you
Bye.
so much. It's been great. I really appreciate the time.